Tavis, it's great to meet you. Thanks
Good
so
to
much
see you,
for being
Jim.
here.
Thanks for having me on.
So I guess you could say the empire struck back last night. New York spoke. Clinton and Trump, prohibitive likelihood to be the nominees. What they also share in common, the two most unfavorably viewed. 65% of the voters can't stand Trump. 56 say they can't stand Hillary Clinton. Is there a message in that, do you think?
I think Americans writ large are sick of a government system that is dysfunctional, that isn't working in their best interest, and that's why I think you've seen the success that Bernie has had before last night and the success of Trump on either end of the spectrum. I said a couple of years ago, and Hillary wasn't so fond of me saying this, and I heard about it, but I said a couple of years ago I thought she needed a challenge from her left for three reasons. One, left to her own devices, she's too hawkish on foreign policy for some of us. Number two, left to her own devices, not progressive enough on some domestic issues. And thirdly, as she made Obama a better candidate, I thought a challenge from her left would make her a better candidate, and I think Bernie Sanders has done that.
Well, let's talk about her for a little bit. The pattern was followed last night. In exit polls, 75% of African Americans who voted in the Democratic primary voted for her. There are two schools of thought. There's the Michelle Alexanders of the world, writing in The Nation. She doesn't deserve the support of the black voter because of what she and her husband did in the 90s, crime bill, whole welfare reform, that sort of thing. And then there are people like Farrah Stockman, won the Pulitzer Prize the other day at the Globe. She's now at the Times. Her first Times article was, there's a generational divide amongst blacks. 58% of blacks in 1994 wanted the crime bill. They wanted to be rescued from what Hillary Clinton called super predators, and she took a lot of crap for this thing. Who's right? Does Clinton deserve the vote of African Americans, or does she not?
I don't think anybody deserves anything. You have to earn it. And so she's campaigning hard for it. I think that she is benefiting, obviously, from the long-standing relationship the Clintons have had with African Americans. And I've said many times that these are public servants, not perfect servants. Bill Clinton got a lot of things right, but he got a lot of things wrong. And it troubles me from time to time to see how they're nuancing, their position on this particular issue. But the point is that Michelle Alexander was right about that. They made some huge mistakes on criminal justice issues. They made huge mistakes on the welfare bill. They made huge mistakes on Rwanda. So again, black voters have to vote their conscience this time around, but there are some challenges.
But why should the sins of the husband be visited on the wife, which is essentially what Michelle Alexander and I guess you were doing?
No, well, first of all, I'm not doing it. I'm saying that she has to earn the black vote, and there's some tough questions to ask. Bill Clinton put the policy in place, but she did, in fact, use the term super predator. She's apologized for that, but there's a mindset that goes along with that kind of verbiage coming out of your mouth.
Let's stay with the black vote for a second.
Sure.
And I don't think anybody's suggesting the Democrat, if it's Hillary Clinton or Sanders, is going to get 90% territory like Barack Obama.
Not going to happen, yeah.
But the conventional wisdom is the vast majority of black votes is the most reliable vote for whomever the Democrat is. Democrat, you have said, and I don't know if you're trying to be provocative or you mean it, that you think Trump as nominee has great potential to steal or take a significant chunk of black voters. How and why?
No, that's not exactly what I said.
What'd you say?
You write these pieces and the editors write the headline, which is obviously about clickbait. I get that. What I said was that conventional wisdom left the station before the train left the station this time around, and that I don't like it when black voters are taken for granted by one party and ignored by another party.
They are taken for granted by the Democrats,
they absolutely
aren't they?
are, and they're ignored by Republicans. At this time around, though, as you have seen in recent days, I'm not suggesting he's going to get a big slice of that vote, but Donald Trump, unlike previous Republicans, is not going to not campaign for the African-American vote, and Democrats got to take that seriously.
There are about as many theses as to why Trump has prospered so far as there are analysts. The one I subscribe to most, I think, is that he's the anti-Obama in a lot of ways. It's a reaction to what people don't like about Barack Obama. The whole litany of things. What theory do you subscribe to as to why he's been so wildly popular in Republican ranks?
I think whenever you choose the other side, it's obviously an anti-vote for the incumbent. So I get some of that, but that doesn't explain the racism. It doesn't explain the hatred. It doesn't explain the vitriol. I don't even buy this notion of an angry white male. It's deeper than that. This election fundamentally, as I see it, Jim, is about what kind of nation we're going to be, who we are as a people, really. And I'm having a hard time juxtaposing the ideals that we profess as a nation with the ideas that are being promulgated in this campaign. And if we can't square those two things, it makes a statement to the nation and to the world about who we really are.
One of the things I know you care a lot about, that I hope a lot of people watching this care about, is income inequality. Does that issue survive the Sanders campaign? The line of the week, which would fit on a bumper sticker, is Hillary Clinton made more in an hour at Goldman Sachs than the Sanders family, the couple, made in a year. It's a great line, I should say. She is co-opted much of his rhetoric on this.
Yeah.
But the day that he decides, I'm no more, whether it's at the convention or not, does this issue survive in a serious way or just a rhetorical way?
Bernie Sanders deserves great credit for raising these issues, and you can't raise one without raising them all together. Poverty, income inequality, and economic immobility. He did a great job at that, and I'm glad he did. To your question, whether it survives, two answers. One, it survives if Hillary keeps it alive, and it survives if we hold Hillary Clinton accountable. I don't believe that great presidents are born. They have to be made. They got to be pushed into their greatness. Abraham Lincoln starts out on the wrong side of the slavery question until Frederick Douglass pushes him. There is no LBJ without MLK pushing him. So Hillary will fail and she'll falter on this and other issues if we don't hold her accountable.
But don't you think it has to be in the candidate's core?
Oh, of course it is.
And
I think
is
Bernie,
it in her core?
Well, I think Bernie has pushed her to be more progressive on those issues. And you're right. She's co-opted the language. But now that she's on the record saying it, we got to make her stand by it.
Let's talk about the state of Black America, the covenant with Black America 10 years after. Your thesis, and you may correct me again, and feel free, is that based upon a number of economic criteria, I think we're 10, I'm not sure how many used, blacks are worse off than they were 10 years ago. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Who's to blame for this?
There's a lot of blame to go around.
Who?
Let's start with African Americans for not pressing their demands, not to proselytize, but the Bible that I read says you have not because you ask not. You got to make demands. And so black people in many ways were so deferential to this president that it became detrimental to their best interest. So you start with African American people not making demands. Look at all these other constituencies, whether we're talking gays and lesbians, environmentalists, Wall Street always gets what it wants. They got something out of this White House. The sad reality is, and the historians can have a hard time trying to juxtapose these two realities. How in the era of the first black president did the bottom fall out for Black America? And so certainly he's going to catch some of that because he should have been bolder.
Well, I want to talk about other people who deserve blame. Let's stay with Barack Obama. If my math is right, when you did this original treatise, most people think it was to judge Obama. It was pre-Obama, was it not?
He wasn't even heard of it.
It was pre-Obama.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I understand you feel that Black Americans didn't put enough pressure on the first black president to do what you would like to have seen him do. But even if he doesn't get the grade you want for outcomes, doesn't he get the grade you'd want for effort on most of these issues?
I think historians are going to be kinder to him down the road than he's being treated in this moment.
How about by you?
But at the end of the day, we got a lot more symbolism than we got substance. And I certainly get the headwind he was up against. I get the obstructionism. But again, something is wrong when everybody else gets something. But in every major economic category, your most loyal constituency lost ground. You can't explain that to me.
So but you don't subscribe to the rising tide notion, do you?
That's that Ronald Reagan philosophy that Barack Obama was wrong to have ever quoted. A rising tide does not necessarily lift all boats. One, it assumes you have a boat. And number two, if the tide goes up too fast, it takes you under. So that notion of a rising tide lifting all, that trickle-down thing, I don't buy that.
But everybody gets some sort of a boat. Let's just take one example, which obviously affects people's pocketbook as well as their well-being, the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
Now, it's still not fully implemented and still hanging by a thread in many ways. Isn't that a rising tide where even if your boat is small, everybody's going to be lifted up to some degree? I know that the reality is even if you have health insurance, a lot of people can't afford to use it.
That's
one of the great frauds of all time. But at least there's some foundation in place. Isn't that good for everybody, including African Americans?
There's a reason why the health industry stock went up the day that deal was announced, because it's better for them than it is for us, number one. Number two, that pre-existing conditions hasn't really kicked in yet, so we'll see down the road how people do fare. Number three, if you can afford to use it, yes, it will make a difference. Number four, it does nothing about health disparities, which is what's killing so many African Americans. So yes, on balance, I'll take it. It's better than nothing, but it wasn't what he promised when he ran.
Well, I bet he watches you quite a bit at night. What's the prescription? Well, or at least people in the morning say, here's what Tavis had to say. So tell me one or two things, not things you would have done differently, but how you would have done them differently so we'd have better outcomes 7+ years into the Obama
I think, number one, there's going to be a huge debate into the future about whether or not he should have started with the economy first rather than health care. He spent a lot of political capital on health care and still didn't get universal coverage, but that hurt him on these other issues,
he
number one.
He never could have gotten it, because if he hadn't had a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate, he never would have. He didn't get one Republican vote.
But he had a House and the Senate the first 2 years, and we can't forget that. He could have gotten more done then. Number three, when they passed the stimulus package, it wasn't big enough. They bet against themselves to begin with. But number two, when they passed it, they sent the money to the states rather than to the cities. If you really want to help everyday people, why not send the money to the cities? You send it to these states, and we saw what happened. These Republican governors hate him so much they wouldn't even take half the money. So why not send the money through the cities rather than the states? I could do this all day long, and that's not to suggest that he didn't do an on balance good job. I think on balance he did a good job. Certainly not worse than most other presidents, but for those of us who voted for him because we thought that it would unleash progressive possibilities, that didn't quite happen.
Hey, why do you think that is? We had the only African-American governor reelected, Deval Patrick, here.
Sure.
And from afar, I knew Deval Patrick fairly well in my job, and I obviously know Barack Obama from afar. I have to say, the moments when I saw them most connect with an issue was when it was an issue about a person of color. But both of them, it seemed to me, always tried to keep their distance because it seemed to me they wanted to be clear, I'm not the president for people with the same skin color as me. I'm the president and governor for everybody. So how do you strike that balance that you think maybe at least Barack Obama hasn't struck properly?
A few things. Number one, you live your life by a certain set of immutable principles, and you don't ever abandon those principles, number one. Number two, I thought the line was that to the victor goes the spoils. If your most loyal constituency can't be advantaged, then what's the point of bragging about having an African-American president? Number three, my granddad put it this way all the time, Jim. There's some fights that ain't worth fighting even if you win, but there are other fights you have to fight even if you lose. In other words, be bold.
Do you think the dissatisfaction that's roughly 50-50 in America with Barack Obama is mostly about the color of his skin or the content of his policies?
It's both. There's no doubt about the fact that as first African-American president, he's caught more hell than any president prior to him. No doubt about that. And so I recognize, as one of my friends says, that Barack Obama was Jackie Robinson. I'm waiting on Willie Mays. So you got to start somewhere. So I get that.
Willie Mays fell down in center field when he played for the Mets, though. So it's a double-edged sword. So I have to be honest with you. When I saw this book, 50 for Your Future Lessons from Down the Road, and I read a couple of pages, I'm saying, wait a second, this guy's kidding. This is not like a real, it's this schmaltzy kind of whatever. And then I start reading it, and I can't stop reading it. You mentioned a minute ago, one of the things you say here, do what you believe, not what you find expedient. Another one I love here, this is number 7, there is no rebate for selling your soul. Do you live your life this way, or do you want to live your life this way?
Both. I'll be honest with you. These are lessons, some of these lessons I learned a long time ago, and I try to live my life around them. Other lessons I'm learning perennially. Let's face it, I'm still faltering and flailing and failing like everybody else, trying to do better every single day. So these are lessons that I'm learning every day myself. But I believe that whenever, wherever, however, and from whomever we get great advice or learn lessons, I think we're obligated to share that. And so I take your point. It may look schmaltzy, but when you get into it, there's a lot of meat on those bones about how to live a better life and get into your authentic self.
I agree with both those things. Well, I said both those things. So I must have agreed.
Yes.
So before you go, Tavis, do you expect to be alive when this country is close to the image that you want it to be cast in?
That's a good question. And my honest answer is I don't know. I've not yet given up on America because even though I'm not an optimist, I'm a prisoner of hope. Optimism suggests there's a certain set of facts, circumstances, conditions, something you can see, feel, or touch that gives you reason to believe that things are going to get better. I'm not an optimist, but I'm eternally a prisoner of hope. Deval Patrick once said, and I agree with him, that you can build a whole life on hope. But I also believe that these days, even hope needs some help. And so again, back to our earlier conversation, it depends on what kind of nation we're going to be. What kind of people are we really? But here's what I've come to believe, though, that as Americans, strange as it might seem to say in this moment, we all want the same things. Republican, Democrat, black, white, educated or illiterate, rich or poor. We want the same thing. And that is, Jim, to live in a nation that will one day be as good as its promise. Here's the problem. The divide, the gulf is too broad between the promise of America and the possibility in America for all of our fellow citizens. So ultimately, we decide that. We get to make the choice about what kind of nation we want to be. If we make the right choice, I remain hopeful, but that remains to be seen. It's an open question.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Tavis.
Thank you, sir.
Smiley. Great
Thank
to
you,
see
Jim.
you.